David Ricardo was born in London in 1772 in a wealthy family of a stockbroker. He himself became a successful businessman who was able to stop working at an early age and to buy a parliament seat. He published his main work on the principles of political economy and taxation in 1817. The book begins with a discussion about the theory of value. I quote, "Commodities derive their exchangeable value from their scarcity and from the quantity of labor required to obtain them. There are some commodities the value of which is determined by their scarcity alone. No labor can increase the quantity of such goods, and therefore their value cannot be lowered by an increased supply. These commodities, however, form a very small part of the mass of commodities daily exchanged in the market. In speaking then of commodities and of the laws which regulate their relative prices, we mean always such commodities only as can be increased in quantity by the exertion of human industry and on the production of which competition operates without restraint." Quote ends. As I explained in the context of Adam Smith, in the conditions of competition of various commodity producers, the prices of commodities tend to equal their cost of production. In the last instance, according to the labor theory of value, this cost of production may be reduced back to labor time. If the demand for a commodity increases, its price rises over what Smith called its natural price. It means the production cost. Income yielded by the production of that type of a commodity, let us say yarn, increases in that case. Capital and labor flow from other branches of production, like weaving, to this industry, and supply of yarn is increased. Therefore, the market price of yarn falls again closer to the natural price. In contrast to Adam Smith, Ricardo made a clearer distinction between the theories of value and distribution. First, the value of a product is determined by the relative quantity of labor which is necessary for its production. And second, the selling price of the product is divided between the three classes that have been involved in its production. These three classes are laborers, capitalists, and landowners. The laborers who have produced the commodity receive wages, the investor of capital receives profit, and the landowners who control the land where the production has taken place draw land rents. I quote, "The value of a commodity depends on the relative quantity of labor which is necessary for its production, and not on the greater or less compensation which is paid for that labor." Quote ends. Ricardo's idea here is that raising wages does not immediately raise the price of the product. Raising wages only reduces profits since the revenue from the sale of the product is divided between labor and capital. This means that the profit rate depends on the level of wages. And wages, on their part in Ricardo's theory, are dependent on the price of the wage goods. And the price of the wage goods depends chiefly on the price of food, because Ricardo believed that grain production could not be increased without a limit, unlike the production of other necessary means of consumption. This idea of the limited nature of arable land is related to Ricardo's very important concept of differential rent. Marginal land is the last piece of land which is still used for production. It is the worst and the least fertile piece of land under cultivation. The production cost of grain in this marginal land equals its market price. For this reason, such an inferior piece of land does not yield any land rent that Ricardo understands as an addition to the production price. But farmers have to pay land rent in all better pieces of land because the greater fertility of these pieces of land decreases the production cost below the market price. So the landowners therefore claim the differential between the individual production price and the market price for themselves. the more fertile the piece of land is, the bigger is the differential between the individual production price and the cost production price in the worst land, which determines the market price. Ricardo argued that the wages always return to the subsistence level. This subsistence theory of wages is based on the idea of the diminishing returns into agriculture. The price of grain determines the price of labor power. Alongside with the growth of population, food production must move to inferior marginal lands, and the cost of labor power tends to rise. Rising wages mean diminishing profits, and this slows down the demand of labor power and population growth. Politically, Ricardo's theory implied that the protection of agriculture leads to an increase in the price of grain and wages, and it necessarily slows down the accumulation. So free trade was beneficial for the whole society. Ricardo argued that the mechanism that equalized wages and profit rates within a national economy did not apply in the world market because labor and capital did not move so easily between countries. In Ricardo's famous example illustrating his theory of comparative advantage, Portugal produces both wine and cloth with less labor than England. In Adam Smith's term, Portugal has an absolute advantage in the production of both products. And even in this case, Ricardo argues, Portugal and England will both be better off if they specialize producing the product which they produce at comparatively lower cost. As you know, this theory is still central in international political economy. In these 4 videos, I have introduced the main ideas of classical liberals, John Locke, the Physiocratic School and François Quesnay, Adam Smith and David Ricardo. I have tried to contextualize these thinkers and to show why and how these authors promoted liberal ideas in political economy. All 4 authors argued against feudal structures and mercantilist policies in favor of free trade. All these authors highlighted labor and production as the source of the wealth of the nations. The most important theoretical concepts I have mentioned are property, productive and unproductive labor, division of labor, the subsistence theory of the wage, the theory of differential rent, and the theories of absolute and comparative advantage. Thank you for listening.